Good evening, everyone. Today I'm reviewing Steel Seed, the latest game from developer Storm in a Teacup, who last gave us Close to the Sun. It's a bit of a throwback to the AAA games of the early 2010s, and it's about a young woman who wakes up in the distant future after the apocalypse in a half-robot body. She finds this guy named Savi who tells her that her father put the two of their consciousnesses in this central mainframe put together to keep a portion of humanity in hibernation until the Earth was healed and ready for their return. And so you have to go and find the pieces of your father's consciousness. Not really sure how that works. Is it like a Usenet download? That's for the old heads out there. And once you do, I guess you can finish the project. But there's a real stick in the mud about the whole situation, a certain General Hogo, and he's ordered most of the robots to try and kill you. Ah, nuts. And bolts. Sorry. Okay, before getting into the gameplay, I have to start with the art direction first, because I played Steel Seed on the Steam Deck, which is where I play the majority of my games, and as you can see, the game has some kind of ghoulish upscaling. They give you multiple types of upscalers, from FSR to XESS to TSR, but the one option they don't give you is off. The devs say they will eventually incorporate a toggle, but that it is not very high up on their priorities, and I just think that's very silly, because it makes the visuals look incredibly messy with lots of ghosting and meshy pixeling everywhere and just really nasty artifacting around moving characters and objects. And this is pretty much an issue with all of the upscalers, though TSR was the one that was the least hideous. The audio mixing is also very strange. The character Savi's audio flat out clipped on my capture device, and I had to turn the volume down on the Steam Deck itself.
I don't understand.
Millennia ago, I helped him lay the groundwork for everything you see here.
But his audio still sounded strangely distorted and much louder than the other characters. Otherwise, the sound design is mostly okay, a lot of good environmental sound effects and ambience. Zoe, the protagonist, and Kobe, the little robot friend, have these dialogues where it beeps like R2-D2 and then Zoe understands it, but a lot of the time Kobe does one simple beep and then there's a several second pause before Zoe responds.
This area is massive. I have no idea where we're going. Yes, but where does this way go?
So it kind of seems like Zoe's just talking to herself and slowly going insane, which, I mean, fair, I would do the same probably if I woke up in this situation. But yeah, the team is going for the look of a AAA game at an indie scale, and I think they do a moderately good job of that, even on the Steam Deck with the upscaling being the way it is. It's got nice lighting and reflections, and they do a good job masking any texture or material reuse. Between the poor upscaling and heavy mix of grays, blues, and oranges, I'd say it's comparable to a AAA game from the PS3 era, like an early Uncharted game, and that's also how the gameplay feels, so let's segue into that. The game mixes platforming and climbing with stealth and melee combat, and has a healthy dose of those thin walkways that mask the load times, which we really haven't seen as much of lately, I guess because of the move to the really fast solid-state drives that modern consoles have, and I guess maybe that might appeal to someone who's weirdly nostalgic for that. Is there some freak out there that loves that shit? Well, it's here in abundance. There are also a good amount of set pieces and chases with lots of destruction, although as always with those, they're incredibly linear, so it's kind of a trick you don't want to rely on too much just to keep the player engaged. But that linearity, I would say, also extends to the gameplay in general. You know, there's not really a lot of side paths that I've seen. You just run in the direction they want you to run, climb the way they want you to climb, complete with yellow neon handholds, and fight the robots that they want you to fight. Now, there are collectibles, and I'll get into that later, but, you know, you just see them within the area you're in. There is, of course, a small tutorial section at the beginning. I did like that they tutorialize using your glide, but it doesn't actually work because your thrusters are broken. I thought that was kind of cute. But you've seen this kind of game and this kind of on-ramping before, and you're either a fan of that going in, or, well, you're probably not even buying this game otherwise. Now, I mentioned the stealth, and in the second level, which is a couple hours in, you finally get the ability to mark enemies by switching to Kobe's perspective. He basically is like an overhead drone that you scout out the area with. So it's nice to have that. I always think that marking is pretty crucial for a stealth game, especially a sci-fi one, and especially with the amount of enemies they start having roam around, because there are some stealth areas that will have around like 15 enemies. I do appreciate that Kobe is not immune to being spotted, and if he gets spotted, then he gets in a fight with the robots and you can't use him for a while. So that is sort of the trade-off for being able to roam and mark everybody. But of course, if you're high up enough, nobody will spot you. But if he does get spotted, then it's gonna take a while for things to reset, because all the enemies are gonna be running around like chickens with their heads cut off. As for the stealth area design itself, it's okay. It's not the greatest in terms of routing. Sometimes it's kind of just a big boxy area with stuff slapped down, and you will get some tiny little side sneaky routes, but they're not super complex. There are some areas that are really massive and also incorporate platforming skill into the mix, and those sections are pretty cool. They also give you an ample amount of takedowns. You've got the behind the back kills, you've got ledge kills, you've got jump kills. You'll get your fill of kills if you prefer to stealth your way through a busy room. There's even glitch grass. It's kind of like they know it's bullshit and that it's fine because it's a video game, so who cares? And I can respect that. But of course, the age-old Assassin's Creed lure with a sound and then takedown is gonna work about 90% of the time. Also, darkness doesn't play any role in stealth, which is a little disappointing. I guess it's because they're all robots, but this is another one of those things that's like a staple. It's like a core tenet of stealth, and so it's kind of odd that it's not there. Now, when you get spotted, you get into combat, and the combat is actually not that hard, which does make the stealth feel a little redundant, except for those areas with a ton of enemies. The robots do hit pretty hard in the early going. If you get hit like 4 times, you go down. And you do have a heal, which heals, I think, about like 25% of your HP, but it does cost an energy bar. You do sort of have an equalizer, because Kobe can fire a charge blast to stun enemies, and that will allow you to go in and rip off a solid 4 or 5 hit combo before needing to dodge again. Now, after you get to the hub area, you can use save points to purchase skills to create a semi-customizable playstyle build, though you need to get the game's equivalent of achievements in order to unlock them, and then you need to spend a kind of tech currency that you get from defeating enemies to buy them. A fair amount of those achievements, by the way, are pretty easy to get, so it's not a huge deal, but it is worth knowing. It's something like, defeat 5 unaware enemies, or use your tools, or use energy abilities, etc. But I will say that the save points being manual is an important thing to know. You're not going to be able to save scum your way through a giant stealth room. If you get 13 of the 20 enemies dispatched and then you die, you're going to have to take out all 13 of those guys again. So despite the game being a stealth game, and this doesn't happen that often, but there are a moment or two where they force you into combat encounters, and I feel like this breaks the stealth game, code. It should always be an option or a fail state to have to get into combat and not enforced on the player. And I mean, it's not like it was a hard moment, I just knocked everyone off the edges, but it seems weird that they gate you in and don't let you just run past them as an option. Moving on to the variety, I'd say the variety on display in Steel Seed is that of the AAA variety. And what I mean by that is you're not going to be given a wealth of activities. It's not an open world game, but just different types of set pieces and environments. Again, think early PlayStation 3 era game. There's a moment where you have to avoid a sniper and the game switches to a side-scrolling perspective, for example. There's a part where you free some deadly electric gears temporarily so you can run and jump across them. There's this big oil lake pond that you can use a jet ski to get around in, but none of that changes like the core gameplay. It's just, different variations on the same theme. In terms of collectibles, there are some data entries to read if you can find the terminal scattered around. You'll be given insight into the world and how it was quote-unquote saved by these not so benevolent AI machines that your character's father has made. There's also hidden ember spheres that Kobe can find, which allow you to upgrade your tools, and you can tell where they are because they have like a purple glow. Your tools, by the way, are sort of some extra options in stealth, like mines and grenades, or like the ability to generate a patch of glitch grass, stuff like that. And then the other collectibles, they're almost not even worth mentioning because they barely count as collectibles. They're just stats on the map screen. So like there are piles of like tech currency that you can smash. There is a turret flying around that you can destroy to get a little extra tech currency. But these things don't really like unlock anything new as far as I can tell. So, they're just completely optional and you could pass by them and not even know you were missing anything. And lastly, there is a playable piano in the hub area, so you can check out my exceptional skills as a musician on display here. Getting into the UI, as I mentioned before, there's no ability to turn off the upscaling. The game does let you adjust various graphical settings to create a custom profile, as well as customizing individual post-processing elements, which I gladly did because the motion blur in that upscaling is just absolutely wretched. So I only have one huge issue with the UI, which I'll get into in a second, and it ties in with just how buggy and crash-prone this game is. It really crashes a lot on the Steam Deck. It took me about an hour and a half of trying different things just to get the game to run properly, and then after the first level's final cutscene, the game just like froze in eternal darkness, and it was not the only time. In that oil lake spot of level 3, the game would reliably hang whenever I died. Like the audio would still be going, but the game itself would freeze. Like I think like maybe the GPU crashed or something like that. And this happened pretty much elsewhere in level 3 too. I think that whole excavation zone area is a bit cursed right now performance-wise. Now, it would help if there was any kind of loading screen or loading animation, but there's not. It's just black screen, and you hope the game hasn't crashed as you wait for around 40 to 50 seconds for the next scene to fade in. There is a traveling text on screen when you fast travel, so like they at least thought of it there, but it's weird that they didn't think maybe to do that for loading in general. The game can even freeze in the middle of gameplay if a cutscene is about to load in, because the cutscene load isn't instantaneous. Here's a moment, for example, where the screen froze on my way to meeting Savi for the first time. I will also mention, just while we're in here, about the camera. The camera could be better. It doesn't always grab focus when an event happens, so you'll hear Zoe remark on something that wasn't in your field of vision, so you just have to assume that something happened because you didn't see it happen. I've also found that the camera is a little wonky sometimes when climbing, as sometimes I will want to pan the camera, but it'll try to lock me into a certain perspective, and it will be a little awkward, the angles sometimes. So overall, I'd say that Steel Seed has promise, but it doesn't quite feel ready for prime time despite a 1.0 release. While it will probably look good on a modern PC, the weird upscaling is not the only issue with the game. The bugs and crashes in general are just a bit much for me, and the load times are way too long. Putting that aside, this is also a AAA style game in a time where people are not exactly clamoring for more, even if you're specifically nostalgic for that Uncharted Heavenly Sword kind of experience, I think that kind of game is still getting made by bigger studios who can put more of a polished shine on it, like Hellblade 2 for example. Yeah, I know AAA games are known for launching broken and all that, but this one's got some obvious technical issues itself. So for me, this is one that you wait on to see how the developers listen to feedback and patch the game. Now, if you have any game you'd like me to review, it's unfortunately gonna have to wait in the queue because I've already got a lot on my plate. I've got this whole month booked already, and there's Next Fest next month, and a trip that I have to visit my family. But you can look forward to a bunch of reviews in this style over the next few weeks. I'll be talking about Bionic Bay and X Zodiac next week, and Gal Guardians 2 and Stygian Outer Gods the following week. If you like the sort of thing I'm doing, you can hit the like button, and you can hit the subscribe button, and of course, a special thanks to my indie darlings, Rob Ska, Tyler McBride, Nick Shalark, Tony Domenico, and Game Trekker. Thanks as always to everyone who supports me, and until next time, you'll find me in another castle.